Welcome to Westpak's webinar on riveting revisions of medical product package testing procedures. I'm Greg Swinghammer. I'll be your moderator and webinar organizer today. Before we get started, let's take a moment to ensure that everyone is ready and familiar with the webinar control panel. First, you should have a control panel on the right side of your screen. You may minimize this panel by clicking on the orange arrow button in the upper left-hand corner. You may expand the panel by clicking on the same button. Secondly, you have the ability to submit questions using the chat pane located near the bottom of the control panel. We will be answering a few questions during the webinar. However, if we are unable to address all the questions during the webinar, our presenter will follow up with you via email afterwards. Today's webinar and video slide deck should be available on Westpak's website tomorrow. With that, let's get started. Today's presenter is Katie Tran. She is a lab manager here at Westpak. Katie, take it away.
Hi, my name is Katie Tran. Today's webinar is Riveting Revisions of Medical Product Package Test Procedures. Due to its popularity from last year, we're doing this webinar again, but with new content. The purpose of this webinar is to educate our customers about the changes to the 4 well-known testing standards. They were revised and released in 2015 and 2016. Thank you for joining us. Here is the agenda of the webinar. We'll briefly go over ISO 11607 and the popular test methods. Then we'll talk about the latest changes to ASTM F1929, F3039, D642, and F88. Let's get started with what is ISO 11607. For people who aren't familiar with ISO 11607, it is a guidance document for validating terminally sterilized medical devices. It is recognized by FDA. You're probably wondering if ISO 11607 is applicable to you. If you have a sterilized medical device which must perform efficiently, safely, and effectively in the hands of the user, then yes, this document is important to you. ISO 11607 is packaging for terminally sterilized medical devices. There are 2 parts. The first part is the requirements for materials, sterile barrier system, and packaging system. Part 2 is validation requirements for forming, sealing, and assembly process. If you're wondering which part applies to Westpak, Part 1 applies to Westpak. We are a testing laboratory that follows the testing standards listed in Part 1. Within ISO 11607 Part 1, under Annex B, there is a list of testing categories. They are accelerated aging, conditioning, integrity, internal pressure, performance testing, puncture, seal strength, and visual inspections. The focus of this webinar is to talk about the revision of testing standards which fall under 3 categories: integrity, performance testing, and seal strength. Let's get started with the first category of ISO 11607 Part 1 Annex B, integrity. The first standard we'll be talking about is ASTM F1929, which is a standard practice for detecting seal leaks in porous medical packaging by dye penetration. What is porous medical packaging? It is where one side of materials is comprised of Tyvek or paper, breathable material. The photo on the slide is a close-up view of Tyvek, which is made out of spun-bound polyethylene. The scope of ASTM F1929 dye penetration testing to detect and locate a leak equal to or greater than a channel formed by a 50 micron, which is 0.002 inch wire in the package edge seals formed between a transparent material and a porous sheet. Notice that keyword transparent. What does that mean? One side of material needs to be clear so we can see the dye penetrant liquid for testing. This is a seal integrity testing meant to detect channel leaks between the Tyvek and the poly material, where bacteria or germs could get through. As I mentioned in the previous slide, it is for porous material where one side of the package, pouch or tray is comprised of Tyvek or paper material. The other side needs to be transparent, clear, to have visibility of the dye penetrant. We recommend this test for seal validation, not package validation testing. You're wondering why we recommend that. For example, you can have a big fat hole in the middle of the pouch and still pass dye penetration testing. This is not a sterile barrier testing. Here is a revision history for ASTM F1929. The current revision for ASTM F1929 is 2015. It was released in March of this year, 2016. Sometimes it takes a while before the ASTM committee releases a revision, so don't assume it has a 2015 revision. It meant it was released last year. If you're wondering why some revisions have 2 years, just like the 1998 and the 2004, where the 2004 is in parentheses, the year in parentheses is the year that the ASTM committee reviewed that particular standard and made no revision to it. It doesn't mean this is the latest revision. The latest revision is still 1998. The previous revision for ASTM F1929 was 2012. The current revision is 2015. There are no changes to how testing is conducted. For those who are not familiar with the standard, let me give a little more information. There are 3 testing methods: injection, edge dip, and eyedropper. Using either method will yield the same results because the same dye penetrant liquid is used. The preferred method at Westpak is injection. Here's a photo of injection. We prefer injection because it requires no alteration to the test specimen. Notice there is a syringe containing the dye penetrant to be injected into the pouch. The dye penetrant liquid needs to be 0.25 inches above the seal. There is a time duration for this test, which is 5 to 20 seconds per seal because of the porous material Tyvek causing wicking. Now it is time for questions regarding what I just talked about in the previous slides. Greg, do we have any questions?
Katie, we don't have any questions at this time. Everybody, please remember to feel free to send in questions if something pops in your head, and we'll answer it at our next stopping period. So back to you, Katie.
Thanks, Greg. Let's continue with the webinar. For the next standard we'll be talking about is ASTM F3039, which is also integrity testing. However, this standard is not listed in ISO 11607 Part 1 Annex B, the integrity category. I will explain more why it isn't listed. ASTM F3039 is the standard test method for detecting leaks in non-porous packaging or flexible barrier materials by dye penetration. What is non-porous packaging? It is where both sides of the material is comprised of non-breathable material. So what is non-breathable materials? For pouches, we have a picture of foil on one side, foil on the other side. Or poly on one side and poly on the other side. Here's a picture of a foil again. I don't have a picture of a foil on one side and poly on the other side. For trays, thermoform tray with foil or poly lid stock. The most common packaging we have tested is foil pouches and poly pouches. I have not seen thermoform tray with foil or poly lid stock yet. If you have them, more than happy to look at them. The scope for ASTM F3039 dye penetration testing is to detect and locate a leak equal to or greater than a channel formed by a 50 micron, which is 0.002 inch wire in the edge seals of a non-porous package. Notice that keyword, non-porous. What does that mean? The package does not have paper or Tyvek material. The latest revision for ASTM F3039 is 2015, which was released in March of this year. Again, the ASTM committee worked on it in 2015 but didn't approve and release it until 2016. This standard is fairly new, which was created as a complement to ASTM F1929, which was for non-porous transparent package. Before 2013, customers who have foil pouches or poly pouches didn't qualify to use the ASTM F1929 and didn't have any options. This standard is now listed in ISO 11607 Part 1 Annex B under the Integrity category because the current revision of ISO 11607 is 2006. They did come out with an amendment in 2014, and that doesn't have the ASTM F3039 on there yet. The previous revision for ASTM F3039 was 2013. The current revision is 2015. In the 2013 revision, there was only one method. It did not have a name at the time. It was essentially the ejection method. Then in the 2015 revision, they decided to name this method a fancy name called Method A. They created a second method called Method B. Method B is to detect and locate a leak equal to or greater than 10 micron. Now we're talking about 0.00039 inch in diameter in a non-porous flat sheet. The focus is to check areas of interest or concern. It isn't meant to check the whole side of material. Basically, to conduct Method A testing, a specific dye-penetrant liquid was injected into pouch. The volume of the liquid is dependent on the size of the pouch. It is at minimum 0.25 milliliter per inch of the seal length. This was what was written for the 2013. The test time is 5 seconds, and the liquid is rotated to the next seal. If the package is comprised of foil where you cannot see the liquid inside, the edge of the seal is placed against an absorbent surface, such as paper, to see the liquid pass through. If the package is poly, there's no need to do this. Now let's talk about Method B, which is a 2015 revision. Method B is for testing for holes or leaks in a flat surface. This is a spot check testing where gross leak detection or bubble testing cannot detect a leak equal to or greater than 10 micron. Remember, gross leak detection or bubble testing detects leaks down to 250 micron with an 81% of probability. Now is another time for questions regarding what I just talked about in the previous slides. Great, do we have any questions?
Hi, Katie. Yes, we do. The first question is, I assume that you're including nylon when you talk about poly.
Yes, that is correct. When I say poly is very generic as far as making sure there's nylon, PETG, high density polyethylene as well. So that's what I mean by poly. Thanks, Greg.
Cool. You're welcome, Katie. That was the only question we had for this break. So if you have questions, again, please feel free to send them in and we'll get them answered. Back to you, Katie.
Let's continue with the second category of ISO 11607 Part 1 Annex B, performance testing. The standard we'll be talking about is ASTM D642. Before we get into that, let's talk about where you can find ASTM D642, since it isn't listed in ISO 11607. ASTM D642 is part of the famous ASTM D4169, which is the package performance testing, also known for shake, rattle, and roll. Here's a photo of a box placed between two platens ready to be compressed to a particular top load per the standard. The top load is calculated using a particular formula or equation listed in the standard. It takes into account, for example, size and weight of the box, and other factors as well. The scope for ASTM D642, also known as vehicle stacking or compression, is to measure the ability of the container to resist external compressive loads applied to its faces, to diagonally opposite edges, or to corners. The latest revision of ASTM D642 is 2015, which was released June of 2015. The previous revision was 2000, where it was reviewed 3 times by the ASTM committee, but there were no changes being made until 2015. The previous revision for ASTM D642 was 2000. The current revision is 2015. There are 2 changes that would affect how you do testing. The first change is that the standard made it clear that they recommend using ASTM D4332 for transit simulation testing. For those who don't know what ASTM D4332 is, it is the standard for conditioning the boxes. The second change is that they recommend ASTM D685 for qualification of box compression strength. So what does that mean? If you're trying to evaluate the box strength of an empty box, then you should use ASTM D685 to condition your box before you do compression testing on it. Both ASTM D4332 and D685 are conditioning standards. Most of our customers are already using ASTM D4332 to condition their boxes before doing ASTM D4169, the shake, rattle, and roll testing. With this change, it didn't affect our customers much. The only customers that were affected were the ones who didn't do conditioning before ASTM D4169. Here's the verbiage in the 2000 revision of ASTM D642. Notice they only mention ASTM D4332 in this paragraph for conditioning the test containers, also known as test specimen, which includes the fiberboard and paperboard containers as well. With the 2015 revision, they separate the test containers for transit simulation and box qualification. Again, ASTM D4332 is for transit simulation, and ASTM D685 is for box qualification. Like I said in the previous slide, they introduced ASTM D685, which is the practice for conditioning paper and paper products for testing. This isn't listed in ISO 11607. Since I'm talking so much about ASTM D685, let's give you more information about this. The scope for ASTM D685 is to define the standard atmosphere for normal preconditioning, conditioning, and testing of paper and paper products, paperboard, fiberboard, and containers made from them, and to specify procedures for handling these materials in order that they may reach equilibrium with their respective atmospheres. The latest revision of ASTM D685 is 1993, which was reviewed by the ASTM committee in 2002. It has been a while since they reviewed the standard. There has only been one revision for the standard, as you can see, which was initially released in 1993. Now isn't the time for questions regarding what I just talked about in the previous slide. Greg, do we have any questions?
Katie, we do have one question. It's concerning ASTM D4169. The question is, ASTM D4169, is it not a year revision of 16 instead of 14?
Somebody out there is pretty on top of their standards. So ASTM D4169, there is a new revision of 2016. It hasn't been sent out in the ASTM tracker, so I'm thinking it'll show up in about a week or two if you're signed up for the ASTM tracker. Westpak is purchasing it and we'll be reviewing that standard, so we'll keep you guys posted with the updates. On our website, it has standards updates and stuff, so you'll see that shortly. Thank you.
Thanks, Katie. Back to you.
The third category of ISO 11607 Part 1 Annex B is seal strength. The ASTM standard is ASTM F88, which is the standard test method for seal strength of flexible barrier materials. The scope for ASTM F88 is to measure the strength of seals in flexible barrier material. What is flexible material? The definition from the standard says a material with flexure, strength, and thickness permitting a turn back at approximately 180 degrees angle. For example, trays with Tyvek lid, because the Tyvek can be turned back 180 degrees. Pouches obviously can be turned back 180 degrees. ASTM F88 is applicable on seals between a flexible material and a rigid material, which means a thermoform tray with a Tyvek lid can be tested. Here is a revision history for ASTM F88. The current revision for ASTM F88 is 2015, even though it was released in January of 2016 this year. Like I said before, it takes a while before the ASTM committee to release a revision, so don't assume it has 2015 revision. It would mean it was released last year. The previous revision for ASTM F88 was 2009. The current revision is 2015. The one change that they made does not affect how testing is conducted. They updated the verbiage for the report section. Here's the verbiage in the 2009 revision of ASTM F88. Pay attention to section 10.1.8, where it says, machine direction of material in relation to direction of pull. Here's the verbiage in the 2015 revision of ASTM F88. Notice how they updated section 10.1.8 to say, machine direction of material in relation to direction of pull may be noted, if no and relevant to the test outcome. Typically, when we conduct seal strength or peel testing on pouches or trays, our concern is to measure the maximum force it takes to separate the material. We aren't concerned about the material direction of the Tyvek or the paper material. So this is the verbiage for 2015. Let's recap what we talked about in this webinar. In the last year or so, there have been 4 standards that were revised. They are ASTM F88, seal strength or peel, F1929, dye penetration for porous material, F3039, dye penetration for non-porous material, and D642, vehicle stacking or compression. The current revision is 2015 for all 4 standards. For those who missed the webinar we did last year, you can see, listen, view it still. It is on our website under Resources and Webinar. We went over 2 standards that were revised. ASTM D4332, which is the conditioning standard, and ASTM D4169, which is the famous shake, rattle, and roll for package performance testing. Thank you for listening to the webinar. This is the last time we'll have questions. So Greg, do we have any questions?
Thanks, Katie. We don't have any questions at this time. So thanks everybody for attending. Got a few cleanup items here. If you missed anything or would like to listen to the webinar again, you can go to www.westpak.com under the Resources and Webinar tab. The webinar materials should be uploaded shortly. We highly value your opinion regarding today's webinar. Please expect to receive our 17-second survey within an hour. We hope you fill it out and return it to us because we're always looking to make improvements in this process. Feel free to ask any questions that come up after the webinar if you think of them. Also check under our Webinar Resources tab for our next webinar. We don't have it currently scheduled, but it'll be there. You also may receive a personal invitation in your inbox. We have 2 locations, one in San Jose and one in San Diego. You can contact either of them for more information about testing or about any of the revisions Katie talked about today. Thank you for attending today's webinar. I'm Greg Swinghammer. Make it a great day.